Hello, we have with us Dr. Musharraf Hussain, who's Chief Executive of the Academy Institute here in Nottingham, to talk with us about prophets. This is the series of beliefs. We're talking about God, angels, books, messengers or prophets, and then the last day and predestination. So Musharraf, help us understand prophets and messengers. Who are they?
Well, we believe that God wants to communicate. He wants to talk to his people. And the best way to communicate to people is to talk through selected and chosen, sinless, perfect human beings. People who God specifically, in many ways, made for this purpose, to embody his teachings and to be able to convey his beauty, his greatness, and his grandeur through these men, really. So they are these special people who convey and teach us about God, really. And in many ways, for us, not just to speak about him, but to actually live lives which are models of how God wants us to live, really.
You mentioned that they're men. What is the relationship between I think it was an Andalusian, Ibn Hazm, or maybe it was another figure.
It is. Ibn Hazm is the only one.
Said Mary was a prophetess.
Yes.
How do we relate? How do we understand this?
Well, Ibn Hazm is perhaps the only Muslim scholar who has this idea that there is women can also be prophets. But other than that, the consensus is prophets have always been men, really. And that is not to, in any form or shape, to show that women are less than men at all. This is not,
So the role of the messenger or prophet is to bring the revelation and to set an example, or am I confusing messengers and prophets here?
Okay, well, there is the nabi and there is the rasul, and the distinction is very simple, that the nabi is the prophet who receives the revelation without a book, and the idea is that he would be most likely reinvigorating, presenting and reviving the teachings of a previous prophet. We believe, for example, John the Baptist was one of the nabis, who revived the teachings of the previous prophets, meaning of Moses and, of course, Zachariah, who was his father. So he was a prophet. But the Rasul or the messenger is the one who also receives revelation in the form of a book, really. So that's the difference. So the prophet who receives a book in form of a revelation in form of a book, is the Rasul, whereas the Nabi is the one who doesn't receive the book.
So how many prophets have there been? And we see names of prophets and messengers in the Quran. Are all the messengers and prophets that we know about in the Quran? Is that the extent of it, or are there more? How's that work?
Well, I mean, if you go back to the idea of revelation and God communicating to his humanity, then of course, we would need far more prophets than that are mentioned in the Quran. The Quran only mentions 25 by name, but the idea is that there are possibly hundreds of thousands of prophets. There is one weak hadith which actually does point to about 124,000. But in Aqaid Nasfi we read that you should never fix a number because we don't know the exact number, really. But we believe that God sent prophets to every corner and nook of this earth. No people have been deprived of a prophet because God wanted to communicate to everybody. In fact, this is why I think some Muslim scholars actually believe that Confucius, Tao, Buddha, and many of the Hindu gods might have actually been prophets, whose teachings then would have been perhaps interpolated, changed, and grossly changed. But we believe that God has been sending prophets all over the world, and so there would be hundreds of thousands.
Okay, thank you. What is it that Muslims believe makes the Prophet Muhammad special and the final prophet?
Well, we believe that he's special in the sense that he's the last prophet, and by being the last means that he was to convey the his religion was to be the universal. His revelation is to be universal for the whole globe, for all humanity, and it would, again, it's actually culmination of what the previous prophets had been teaching. So it's a culmination, it's a final stage, and in a way, the maturation, you can say, of the divine revelations when humanity had reached its maturity and was actually at a very special juncture in its history, you know. So that is where I think the prophet comes and becomes very special. That this is at a time when there is a big change in humanity, almost becoming global, whereas before that it was very tribal, very parochial, and now Muhammad was to be a universal, a global prophet, because human history had reached a point where it was now, and it did become global. Within less than a century, Islam had spread in the west to as far as Spain, and in the east as far as China.
Last question. So I think you said the prophets are sinless, but does this mean that the Prophet Muhammad didn't make any mistakes, or you know, how far does this go?
Okay. Well, sinless means that they do not intentionally disobey God. So they would never intentionally disobey God. Occasional slips have happened, but they are only slips, and therefore they are, you know, because they're not intentional, therefore they don't really matter. And you know, God is very forgiving, overlooks the mistakes. But as far as the prophets are concerned, they are ma'soom, which means that they actually are protected. That's the literal meaning of it. They are actually protected from falling into becoming egotistical, falling into the trap of the Satan, falling into losing their temper. So they are protected. God protects them because of their strong character, actually. You know, He has given them a perfect character.
Thank you, Musharraf, for helping us understand prophets and messengers, and thank you for being with us.